Welcome back to Iceman and Coach, everybody. This is the Iceman, Matt Frates, the coach. Brad Powell is not here this week. I want to thank everybody who tuned in last week. We had an amazing reception with that episode that we did, or I did, and mostly it focused on Notre Dame college football playoff, but it did get into some other things, and I want to say thank you to everybody who showed up to that. Whether you hated on it or whether you loved it, it doesn't matter. It amazed me, but Notre Dame is polarizing, and that is something that we are going to watch out for. But I want to start in college football this week. And it's a story that had broken prior to when I recorded that episode, but I just didn't put it in, or it didn't make the cut, and that is Sharon Moore in Michigan. This story is kind of wild when you think about it. Let's go all the way back until Wednesday, late in the day Wednesday, maybe 4 o'clock. I got the news alert that Sharon Moore had been fired as the head coach of Michigan. Now, when I first saw that headline, the timing was very interesting. And the reason it's interesting is because the coaching carousel this year in college football has been kind of all over the place. There have been a lot of vacancies. There's a lot of movement. Big, high-profile jobs were at stake. And so for Michigan to fire their coach almost after all of those spots had been filled felt like interesting timing to me. And I had kind of thought this season that maybe Sharon Moore was coaching for his job in a way. That sounds weird because he was almost the handpicked successor of Jim Harbaugh. But hear me out on this. I felt like he was not really accepted by the fan base, at least en masse. I had heard from some fans about him that they weren't fans. And last year they went 7-5. They beat Ohio State, so that's a huge mark for him. This year they had Bryce Underwood. There was a lot of talent, and they went 9-3, which is disappointing by Michigan standards, or at least I think that's disappointing by Michigan standards. It's really good for every other school. I know I would have taken that for Virginia Tech. They didn't make the college football playoff for the second year in a row, but there were things that were looking good in Michigan. And so for him to get fired, it felt surprising. And then over the course of that day and over the course of the next 24 hours, more and more details had come out. Then we learned that Sharon Moore was let go for cause because he'd been having an inappropriate relationship with a staff member at Michigan. Okay, that's a different sort of firing. They're not firing him for what's happening on the field. They're firing him for what has happened off the field. And then a news alert broke that Sharon Moore was in police custody. At that point, for me, I was thinking, what the hell is going on? Because this is an escalating situation, and I can't get my head around this. We find out that he was arrested because he was at the home, allegedly, of the woman that he was having an affair with, allegedly, and that he had gone there, threatened to kill her, allegedly, and threatened to off himself. All of this allegedly. Want to make that very clear. He has not been convicted of anything in a court of law. He has been fired by the university, but that in no way means he is guilty. All of this has happened, and now we've come back around to having a little bit of context here. Sharon Moore was not 40 years old. From what I understand, he was a family man who had just had a baby. And so to be in an affair with a woman on his staff, a younger woman on his staff, is unfortunate from a moral perspective. It certainly happens all the time in this country, probably happens a lot in college football, but when you find that out, it's a little bit disappointing. And then when you realize that he had one of the best college football jobs in the country, I said that in a reel last week about him, and somebody came to the comment section and said, honey, Michigan is not a top 5 job. It's not even a top 15 job. That's incorrect. That is highly incorrect. When the Michigan job is open, it is 100% high profile, no matter the other jobs that are up. There's only a handful of jobs that people would consider better or high profile, and that job is one of them. So Sharon Moore had the job. He had the dream. He was the head coach of Michigan's football team. That's amazing. It's an amazing job. And now all of that is gone. But it's not even about what happened on the football field, because right now it's about, can his life get back on track? He's done in college football. At least I think he's done. Art Briles is mostly done in college football, but he recently just got a head coaching job at a really low level. Think about how long that took. It took over a decade. Sharon Moore probably is not going to recover from this because on top of all that, it looks like he may be doing some jail time. It looks as if what has happened to him is far bigger than football. He made a mistake for sure, but then it seemed to compound on itself with all the other alleged acts that happened to him. And so Sharon Moore's career, I believe, as a college football entity in any way is over. How do you recover? How does a university take him back with that on his ledger? And if he does come back in any way, depending on his jail sentence, if he goes to jail, how do you answer questions about that? I understand that people make mistakes, and I certainly want to give grace for people to not be reliving the worst day of their life. But this was mistake after mistake after mistake. And it's hard to forgive somebody when you're paying them the kind of money that coaches are getting paid now in college football to come back with something like that on the resume. I certainly wish the best for Sharon Moore's family because they are victims in this. Again, all of this is alleged, but right now, switching gears, the University of Michigan is currently actively in a head coaching search. And the first name that came to mind for me was Alabama's Kalen DeBoer. His name has been linked to just about every job. And that is curious for the sole reason of you have to ask one of two questions. Is Alabama unhappy with him, or is he unhappy with Alabama? I don't think either of those is true. But Alabama is one of the jobs, if not the job in the country, that probably has higher expectations, higher stakes. Maybe the university itself doesn't put higher stakes on their head coaches, but the fan bases do. I think that Michigan's fan base is rabid for sure. It is a top 5 intense fan base in college football. I just don't know if it has the level of intensity that Alabama does, because football in the South is so completely on another island from almost anything emotionally in this world. SEC football, when they say it matters more, it's not that it matters more on the field. It's emotionally, it matters more to the people invested because there are far fewer pro football teams in the South, less attention for people to give other entities, and so they give it to these universities. Alabama has extremely high standards. Every time you lose, every time you come up short, that fan base, the media, you're hearing about it. And Kalen DeBoer has come up short, I would say, quite a few times. If he hadn't made the playoff, which I said last week he was gifted, you have to ask yourself, would they be talking to him about we need to turn this around right now? Because that would be, 7 losses, I think, on his resume. I believe they lost 4 games last year if you include the bowl game. That's iffy. But 10-3 this year, they got into the playoff. And now they find themselves against Oklahoma. But I think that's an interesting name in the sense that perhaps moving to Michigan, first of all, he'd be financially taken care of. No doubt. He's financially taken care of now, but there he would be equally. That's my point. At Michigan, you would have less competition to get to the pinnacle of where you're going to, or where you want to get. You have to beat Ohio State, of course. And after that, you kind of have to look at Oregon, Penn State, if they were to ever come back, if Indiana stays on top. The Big Ten is very top heavy. And after that top heaviness, it's a lot of mid and a lot of crap. So they should be able to really stay on top if Kalen DeBoer goes there and does what we know he can do, which I think is recruit and I think is coach football teams. When he loses, it will feel bad, but I don't know if it will feel Alabama bad, if that makes sense. Or at least I don't think that it's the same. And so if Michigan comes calling with a lucrative offer, which it would be a lucrative offer, of course, he would have to think about it. He would have to think hard about it, I would think. And so I think that that's a realistic possibility for him because maybe taking that job, get him back to a geographic region in the country that's more familiar. He is a Midwestern guy, getting to a fan base that maybe is slightly more forgiving, and maybe getting to a town that is a little bit less intense. Maybe he doesn't have to worry about going to the local diner and being accosted by Alabama fans who think that he's not going to make it. It'll be interesting to watch that because I think he may be tempted if the price is right. If it's not him, there are other candidates that are going to come out, of course. And I think that it'll be one of two things I think will happen. Either they will get an interim guy, kind of maybe like Sharon Moore, or they will just go for the home run and try to offer somebody a lot of money to come out of whatever job that they have and take this job. If it is Kalen DeBoer, the question is, does Lane Kiffin then leave for Alabama? Would Alabama do that? There's a lot of dominoes that could fall here. But Michigan has to make a choice very quickly because they will quickly find themselves behind the 8 ball. And in college football now, you can't afford that. You need to be on. You need to be recruiting constantly. And that's with this early signing period that is starting very soon. So Michigan's going to have to make a choice. Whoever ends up the coach at Michigan is going to be handed a team that theoretically should be young and talented. It depends on what kids stay. If Underwood stays, I think they have a really legitimate chance of building around him, but they could have a very solid base, and that coach could be very much gifted a potential playoff team next year. The situation is certainly interesting. The situation is unwanted if you're Michigan, but I think at this point, it is what it is, and they're going to move forward and find the coach that's going to get them to where they want to be, which is back winning national championships. If we're sticking with college football, we're looking at the college football playoff this weekend. Friday night, of course, is that Alabama-Oklahoma game. And that's going to be, again, we're going to be watching storylines here of, number one, is Kalen DeBoer going to lose to Oklahoma for a third straight time? And if he does, what happens after that? It's weird to say that a coach with 10 wins may be in must-win territory. Brent Venables has much less to lose in this game than Kalen DeBoer does. John Mateer played well before he got hurt. When he came back, that offense was, to say one word, limited. But that defense may be the best defense in America. It's played amazing. And that's why Oklahoma has been in so many games. But Alabama has to win this game. They have to win at least one playoff game, because I realized something thinking about this, actually, that in the NFL, when we look at players and we look at coaches, we look at their statistics in the regular season, and of course, we bring up their statistics in the postseason. In college, we didn't really have that. We didn't pull up bowl game records and everything like that. We looked at their statistics. Did they win the Heisman? Did they win the national championship? Where were they in All-American status? But we never looked at playoffs. And now with coaches, do we start looking at playoff record? Once we get so far into this model, now we had the 14 playoff, now we have the 12-team playoff, and we're going to have more data that we can analyze on these coaches. So if Kalen DeBoer never wins a playoff game, if he loses this playoff game, is that going to be a metric that we now use? And I say we as in Alabama, the boosters, the media, dumbasses like myself. Are we going to use those metrics to now measure whether a coach is good? When we say, yeah, Kalen DeBoer has won 30-something games in the regular season, Alabama, 0-2 in the playoffs, I think that that's very valid. I mean, the playoff is here to stay now. You're going to have more data, more games to win or lose. And if you make the playoff, it pretty much guarantees that a lot of teams, a lot of good teams, are going to end their year losing. Bowl games are not what they used to be. But now, if you make it to the playoff, unless you win the national championship, your season is ending in a loss. I don't know if players really feel like that's something that they take into the offseason, but it's just an interesting element of this to consider because, yeah, you are going to lose. If Oklahoma loses this game to Alabama, I don't think anybody's going to be surprised. I think it'd feel as if Alabama was due. And again, the offensive challenges that Oklahoma has had with Mateer at quarterback, again, after getting hurt, you wonder how healthy he actually is. They haven't had to do a whole lot. Keep in mind, when they beat Alabama earlier in the year, they were outgained by 2 times. I think it was 200 to 400 yards. And so for Alabama to lose that game with that kind of yardage differential just tells you how good that defense really is, keeping them out of the end zone. It also shows you, too, that the limitations of that offense are 100% buoyed by the play of this defense. It just is something, it's a safety blanket for them. They can play bad. So Alabama needs to win Friday night. They're going to be playing on the road. There's going to be a lot of stakes. This is going to be a close game, I think. I do think that Alabama's going to pull it out just because of how badly they got embarrassed against Georgia. All of the storylines about DeBoer. I think that you may see an extension come out of Alabama potentially, and they may end up winning this football game. If they win this football game, you're going to see an extension. They're going to want to keep this guy. But I see Alabama being focused. I thought that coming into the Georgia game, but I also thought Georgia was the hottest team coming into this game. I don't feel that way about Oklahoma. So I think this will be a close game. Definitely a fun one to watch on Friday night. The other game, Tulane at Ole Miss. This game is so intriguing because both of these teams essentially either have no head coach or a lame duck head coach. Obviously, Tulane comes into this game heavy underdogs. Talent-wise, I don't think they have the guts to match up. Talent-wise, I don't think they have the guys to match up. I think, obviously, they lost 45-10 earlier in the year. Now, on the other side, Ole Miss is going to have a hodgepodge of coaches. On the offensive side of the game, they're going to have coaches that are leaving for LSU. On the defensive side, they have guys that are staying. Is there going to be continuity there? Is Chambliss and Lacey going to be able to do what they've done all season long? Will they be distracted? Will they be recruited? I think this game has more potential for an upset than people are giving it. Tulane, I think, feels very disrespected, but I think they respect their head coach, even though he is leaving. I think they respect him tremendously. I think they would want to win one for him. Can Ole Miss keep it together without a real leader? Will they be rudderless? I'm not saying that the new head coach doesn't know what he's doing, but he was a defensive coordinator. He doesn't give me head coach vibes. And you wonder if the momentum that they had at the end of the season was completely deflated when Lane Kiffin left, how Lane Kiffin left, and now the coach is going, coming, going. I don't know. I feel like Ole Miss has a ton of talent, and they could make a deep run into the playoff if they hadn't already had that. Ultimately, I think that they win, but I also don't think it's going to be a wash. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I think that Tulane is going to do everything that they can to send their head coach off into the sunset with the best performance that they can. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's close at halftime and then it gets a little bit further away as the game progresses because the talent disparity is just too much to handle. And then there is Miami and Texas A&M. Now, this game is fascinating because Miami has been the talk of the town getting in over Notre Dame. They have a quarterback who has played in the playoff in Carson Beck. He looked a lot worse toward the end of the season than he did at the beginning of the season. Miami did pick up some wins in a row at the end of the season. They got in. Maybe they get a momentum boost. But Texas A&M, even though they're the 7th seed and they lost to Texas, don't sleep on them. That is a team that has been uber talented, but they haven't really been battle tested. They played Notre Dame. They won that game. They played Texas. They lost that game. It's been a couple of weeks now. Will there be some rust? I think Mike Elko watches that tape of Texas probably every day, and it's going to be loud at Kyle Field. Miami has probably not played in an environment like that. Remember when they beat Notre Dame? It was in Miami. Again, I think this is probably the most hostile crowd they're going to face. Texas A&M fans, look, y'all are like a cult, but I will give it to you. You have a ton of passion, and I think you're going to show up. That 12th man is going to be there. Kyle Field is going to be setting off Richter scales in the state of Texas. I just think defensively they have too much for Miami, and I think Miami is a team that always crumbles in the biggest moments. I think they're going to crumble here, but I think it's going to be a close game. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I don't think it's going to be a boat race, but Texas A&M is really good, folks. And I think that that loss to Texas may have been just enough to wake them up because they faced a good team. They didn't play well against a good team. Now they're motivated to make a huge run in the playoff. And so I think Texas A&M is going to win. And in the last game of the playoff out in Eugene, poor JMU. I'm probably piling on to what a lot of people think is that JMU has absolutely no chance in this game. Maybe that's unfair, but Outson Stadium is a really tough place to play, and only one team this year has gone in there and made it look easy, and that's the number 1 team, the only undefeated team in the country. JMU is certainly talented for the level at which they play. The Sun Belt, they have dominated the Sun Belt. But Dan Lanning is a maniac. He is the kind of coach who wants to prove points. He is the kind of coach who there is never a lead that is safe enough in his mind. He's heard the rhetoric about JMU doesn't belong. And he's the kind of guy, not because he's malicious, but I think he's such a gamer and he's that dude. He's going to want to prove to everybody that JMU doesn't belong. The 21-point spread that I saw this morning feels light. It feels as if it's going to be a massive blowout, that Oregon is going to go in there. Dante Moore is going to have his way with that defense. And Dan Lanning is going to smile the entire time on the sideline, knowing that he is showing everybody that James Madison didn't belong. I think this is going to be the most lopsided game of the tournament. I think Oregon is poised for a huge, huge game, and it's going to give them a ton of momentum heading into their second-round matchup against whoever that may be. I feel bad for JMU because they're getting disrespected left and right. They didn't do this. They didn't ask to be put in. The committee put them in. They are going to compete, no doubt. And they have earned their way to 12 wins this year. You don't just get gifted 12 wins when you play. They didn't ask to have all of this media scrutiny on them. They didn't lobby to the committee. The committee made a choice, a tough choice, but they made a choice. And James Madison, unfortunately, is getting a ton of ire from so many people in the media, so many fans. And I think that they're going to be shown the door very quickly and very sturdily by Oregon. I feel bad for them. But that's my breakdown of the games this weekend. Nice to have some college football on the docket. It'll be interesting, and I'll be fascinated to see if these games are more competitive than last year. People complain that the first-round games were terrible last year. It may be inherent to the product, but we shall see. Lastly, in college football, before we move on, Arch Manning and his camp, or his dad, announced that he is going to be staying at Texas. To me, this isn't really news. Arch Manning was not what we all thought he was going to be heading into the season. But I don't think that that's Arch Manning's fault. I think that's the media's fault. I think that is the hype train's fault. People put way too much pressure on him, way too many expectations. He wasn't where he needs to be. He needed to develop. He had a tough first half of the year. I thought he was hurt. I seriously thought he was hurt. He had a much better second half of the year. Obviously, that huge win against Texas A&M. He's going to play in a bowl game, may be able to get a 10th win. There's a lot of potential there. And I think another year in college will just give him more snaps, more ability, and I think he's going to ascend. He may still have been the best quarterback prospect-wise to come out this year if he did, but I never really thought he was going to. I honestly thought he was going to stay. His dad, his family, they're all going to give him great advice. He's not going to leave early. He's going to do whatever's best for Arch. Staying at Texas is what is best. He's going to be the starter there. And they'll probably be a playoff contender, no doubt. They may even be a playoff team next year. That will help us know whether Arch is for real or not. And he probably will end up leaving after next year. He does have 2 more years of eligibility left. He could stay. You never know. But this was not really news to me, at least. I know a lot of people were like, oh, I thought he was going to be in the NFL. He knows what he's doing. His camp knows what he's doing, and he is doing the best thing for him, which is to play more football and not go into the NFL draft early, because the NFL will eat you alive if you're not ready. And there is a laundry list of quarterbacks that have come in after 1 year and not made anything of themselves. And they don't last very long, especially if you get drafted by a bad team, which, by the way, if he came out, he'd get drafted by a bad team, and you don't want that. So Arch Manning will stay. That's not really a surprise to me. That's really all that's going on in college football. I want to talk a little bit about the NFL now. The playoff push is happening, but right now my focus has been on bad football teams, because bad football teams now, ones that have been eliminated from playoff contention, are starting to think about next year. They're starting to make moves that are dictating what they might be doing in this offseason. And the first team to make a move were the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins benched Tua. Now, they have 3 games left. They're 6-8. They just lost to the Steelers on Monday night. But this team is going nowhere. Mike McDaniel, I thought, was not going to make it through this season. I thought that the Tua experiment, the Mike McDaniel experiment, or the experiment of the combination of the two of them is done. That it's run its course, and we kind of know it is what it is. But I think that that mini winning streak that they had may have convinced Dolphin management that Mike McDaniel should get another year. The benching of Tua has a lot of potential implications. I did a reel on this on TikTok. At INC Sports is the handle if you want to follow us there. And I talked about how it could be one of two things. First, it could mean that his time in Miami is done, that they're just done with him. He's not going to be able to recover from this. He'll be a trade piece in the offseason, and they'll part ways with him. That is certainly very plausible with the optics of this move. The other part of it is it seems like a move made by a coach who knows he's going to be back. It wouldn't surprise me if management has already told him what his fate is. Either way, if he's coaching for his job, benching the only guy on the team that seems like he can get the job done and can get them wins maybe isn't the best option in the league, but on the team and what they have in front of them, it doesn't feel like a move made by a guy who's coaching for his job. Usually in that case, you have a rookie or a young guy on the squad. I mean, yes, they have Quinn Ewers, but they didn't draft him thinking that he's the next coming. They drafted him probably to be a backup. I mean, he was a 7th-round pick. That's normally what you pick a 7th-round quarterback for. You're not picking him to be the guy. Rarely do they become the guy. I understand that Brock Purdy has become somewhat the guy in San Francisco. Tom Brady at 199. Those are outliers. So if Mike McDaniel knows that he is keeping his job, he's either benching Tua because he's done with Tua, or they recognize that Tua's health is shaky at best, and so they're benching him for these 3 games so that they can have one last hurrah next year together to finally try and make this work. I'm not sure which one I believe more. My gut tells me that getting benched is similar to Kyler Murray, where you know it's time to go. It's time to move on. But at the same time, the Dolphins have invested so much money in him that if they get rid of him, the dead cap hit that they would take would be almost catastrophic. The Dolphins aren't a franchise that I associate with big money, that they can just have these cap hits and be fine. There's a handful of franchises that can handle that. Obviously, the Cowboys are one of them. Can the Dolphins handle that? I don't think so. It would seem highly plausible to me that this is just a keep to a safe move, and they're looking to next year, and they're going to try it again. If they decide not to keep him and they have to take a cap hit, this is just a sign of an organization to me that's not serious. The Dolphins have never struck me as a franchise that I respect in the way of, oh, the Dolphins did something, we better watch out. They just don't feel that way to me. They feel like unserious. They feel like they can't have nice things for too long. They had good times with Tua and Mike McDaniel, but they couldn't win big games. They always faltered at the end of the season. They couldn't play well in the cold. I get it. But at the same time, that feels organizational, because what have the Dolphins really done since Dan Marino went to the Super Bowl, which, by the way, was a long time ago. Long time ago. I just don't think the Dolphins are a serious organization. Any of these moves is plausible to me, but it is interesting to watch because, as I mentioned, Kyler Murray benched basically for the year. Now, he was hurt. He's not hurt anymore. Healthy scratch. That's over with. Kyler Murray is going to find himself somewhere, because I do think that he is on the short side, so his ability to throw over the middle is limited. He can't really see over the line. These offensive linemen are aliens now, but he's got a lot of juice in his legs. He can make plays. He can keep plays extended, and I think a lot of teams are going to want a player with that kind of skill set. Kyler Murray would be a definitive upgrade for a lot of teams out there who are playing with nothing. I mean, he'd be an upgrade over Aaron Rodgers, wouldn't he? I would think. He's a guy who can get these dudes the ball. Now, they should probably put actual dudes there, because I did talk about that on TikTok as well, about you brought in Aaron Rodgers and you don't really put any weapons around him. Not a great organizational move. I think Kyler's going to find a home very quickly. The question is, will Tua find a home? If Tua is done with the Dolphins, what's the incentive to pick him up? He's one concussion away from retirement, or he should be. Well, let me go back. He should be retired already. That's my belief. I think it's personally dangerous for him to be playing football after what I saw, but it's his decision. But they have to keep him safe. So any franchise that picks him up is going to have to pay him, and they know that they may not have him for very long, that he is one hit away from being done. Like done. Is that enough of a risk that teams want to take? Maybe. Maybe there's a team out there that feels like, hey, if we get a guy like this who's accurate and can throw the ball over the middle, maybe we can get one good year out of him. That's why I said, like, the Steelers would be perfect for Kyler Murray in a sense. Would they be good for Tua? I don't know. I mean, the weather, the way that division plays, it's a tough division. Can he handle that? I don't know. Could Tua be attractive for a team that is in need of a quarterback that could be in win now mode? Yes. Is he the guy that is going to win you a Super Bowl? I don't think so. So I think Tua's fate is a little bit less certain than Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray is going to find a job. I don't think that Tua is going to find a job. But then if you look at Cleveland, Shedeur Sanders didn't play very well in their most recent outing. And look, Shedeur Sanders has a limited skill set. I've been rooting for him because I don't root against guys in a lot of ways. Did I think he was a first-round talent? Not really. I just think that he was hyped up a lot because of who his coach was, who his dad is. I think NFL scouts knew more about the process than anybody else. And they saw him and said, that's not a first-round talent. He's gotten playing time. He holds the ball for a long time, which allows him to make plays, also allows him to do a lot of stupid stuff. And I just don't know if Shedeur Sanders is the answer or the future. But the Browns are in such a tough spot, similar to the Dolphins, because they will open the practice window for Deshaun Watson, that 250 or whatever the hell it is, $1 million albatross who has sucked when he's been on the field for the Browns. Let's just be perfectly honest about that. And they're going to have a quarterback room that's going to be Shedeur Sanders and Deshaun Watson. And my God, that's about as Browns as you could possibly get. I don't know if Browns fans are excited about this. I don't know how they feel about, well, a lot of people feel a way about Shedeur. I'm not a hater. I'm not a stan. I just look at what I've seen. It's still a small sample size, so I think Shedeur Sanders is going to get more time. He's going to start the rest of the year, so 3 more games. Will that be definitive to know that Shedeur can make it or not? It's hard to evaluate a quarterback after 7 games, and it's hard to evaluate a Browns quarterback after 7 games. The Browns are terrible. They're not an organization that sets anybody up for success, really. I mean, Baker Mayfield is a starting quarterback in this league. By the definition of being the number 1 pick, he's probably a bust. But at the same time, Baker Mayfield looks better in Tampa than he did in Cleveland. It becomes a Cleveland issue. They've had how many quarterbacks over the years? So many. So many. And they're going to face a quarterback room with a $250 million guaranteed quarterback who kind of reset the market, and a guy who people want to see succeed, but unfortunately may not have the goods to do it. It's not that Shedeur is bad. It's just he may not have the talent at the NFL level to play the way that he felt he was playing at Colorado. He wasn't even a Heisman finalist. I don't think he was one of the best quarterbacks in the country. I mean, his offensive line sucked, yeah, but that also kind of exposed some of his weaknesses. And you're seeing that in Cleveland, too. And I just think that that's a disaster. They're going to draft a quarterback for sure. Unfortunately for the Browns, this quarterback class, not great. Not great. Fernando Mendoza, on TikTok, I called him Francisco Mendoza, and I swear I was thinking of a second baseman or something from the 1980s. I apologize. I took that down. But is Mendoza going to be a franchise guy? I don't think so. He's a Heisman winner, sure. Great college quarterback, but not an NFL quarterback. And so they're going to draft one. And teams next year in the draft are going to evaluate these guys and probably over-select somebody. And guess what? They'll be right back to where they were. And so the NFL has an interesting dynamic right now because you have these teams who are moving on from quarterbacks, and then you have the Bengals. I'm going to say it. I think Joe Burrow might be done with the Bengals. And can you blame him? I said last year I helped host Political Football, and I asked, are the Bengals wasting Joe Burrow's prime? And the answer is yes. He didn't play inspired football against the Ravens, that's for sure. His post-game conference left a lot to be desired if you're a Bengals fan and if you're a Bengals executive. And then when he asked to clarify, he kind of said, crazy things happen. Joe Burrow's not happy. I think the real risk for Bengals fans is, will Joe Burrow pull an Andrew Luck? And they better hope not. Does he have the kind of leverage that he will go to the organization and say, I want out? Yeah, he does. And if they don't trade him and he sits out, they're going to find out exactly what it means to go back to being the Bengals, because they'll lose Jamar Chase. They'll lose T. Higgins, because who wants to play there without Joe Burrow? And they'll be right back to being bottom feeders. The Bungles once more. That's going to be an interesting storyline to watch. Is Joe Burrow done in Cincinnati? That's going to play out over the course of the offseason, and I would not be surprised if something crazy did happen, as Joe said, and I think he could do so much better somewhere else. I want to see him win a Super Bowl. I want to see him in the spotlight, and there was such a small window where he was able to be an equal with Patrick Mahomes, and it just hasn't lived up to that because the organization has spent money on cute weapons for him and great weapons, but they've not spent money on anything else, really. And I just believe that him not being able to stay healthy, always under duress, that is causing a lot of consternation for him, and compounded by the fact that that organization is cheap as hell. Joe Burrow may not be a Bengal anymore. So the NFL is rife with a whole bunch of storylines. Obviously, on the field, we are pushing toward the playoffs. Teams are starting to get eliminated now. The Bills obviously are surging after beating the Patriots this past weekend. We're going to find out a lot more. There's 3 games to go. This weekend coming up is going to give us a lot of data points on some teams. I think we're going to really find out who's going to separate themselves and who isn't, because injuries are piling up. Mahomes is out for the season, and we'll talk about that at another date. Devontae Adams got hurt. Micah Parsons tore his ACL. I mean, these are big-time injuries that are going to affect teams this year and next year. I want to deep dive into the Chiefs the next time we talk, because it's really a larger philosophical discussion that is evergreen right now with the fact that they are out of the playoffs. They're not going to be playing him, obviously. And so I think we can kind of evaluate some of the things that are happening between now and the end of the season for the Chiefs. But I do want to talk philosophically about that, and we will talk about that next time. I just wanted to come on here again 2 weeks in a row, talk about some things that are happening, talk about the Sharon Moore, the playoff. I mean, it's going to be fun to watch some college football this weekend, NFL action. And philosophically, quarterbacking in the league in terms of the NFL has been so interesting, and I think we're going to see more teams start to make some decisions. I said last week, transitional year it feels like in the NFL, and this might be the time that we're seeing some of these moves start to play out, with Tua possibly on the outs, maybe Joe Burrow on the outs. Kyler Murray is probably going somewhere else. There's going to be a large shift in the way that the NFL looks next season, and maybe some of that is starting today. Want to remind everybody that you can obviously call the voicemail line. 703-718-6314 is the number if you want to leave us a voicemail, text message, anything like that. If you're watching on YouTube now and you haven't subscribed, we would love for you to stick around, because we obviously love talking sports with each other, love talking sports with people who are casuals, who honestly, they just want to talk some ball. That's what we like doing too. And if you are listening, Apple, Spotify, wherever it is, subscribe, review, a few stars, things like that. Helps us to know whether we're doing a good job or not. But I'm happy to come back here and talk with you. Hopefully, Brad will be back next week. As I said last week, Braves talk for all you Bradley Braves fans out there, or college basketball fans. Hopefully get back to that soon. Brad is on the mend, and hopefully he will be back. Folks, next week is Christmas, so I don't know if you'll hear from us or not. If I don't talk to you next week, I hope everybody has a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays. You will hear from us or me one more time before the end of the year. Hope this finds everybody well. I hope this finds everybody safe, and I'll talk to you next time. This is Iceman and Coach.